Well, hello there. I'm Drew Badger, the co-founder of EnglishAnyone.com, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to episode 21 of the Power Learning Podcast. It's going to be another fantastic episode. I know I always say that, but I do believe they get a little bit more fantastic each time I produce an episode. There's always new things to learn and new things to think about, and probably the most interesting thing is that I learn a little bit more about teaching every month, so that way I can give that knowledge and information to you and help you get fluent faster. It's really fun to make these podcasts, but again, it does get hot. We're still in the middle of summer, and I'm in a steamy room right now. This is the quietest room I could find where I can actually make this episode for you. So let's get into it. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about something that I actually mentioned to my Power Learning members not that long ago. And my Power Learning members, this is my free email subscription where you can learn lots of tips and a lot more detailed information than what I give even in videos. And it kind of helps support what I teach in my program, Master English Conversation. So if you're looking for more information about how to learn specific learning quick tips, and especially the psychological things, the mindset things that actually are even more important than the language you're learning, I highly recommend you join if you're not already a member. But what I was talking about in an email recently to Power Learning members is how different what I do is from really what most of the people that are doing in the actual teaching world. And this happens because most people are doing the typical thing that they were taught how to do, and again, it's the actual thing that I was first taught how to do when I began teaching. Now, over 10 years ago, when I first came to Japan, I had no real teaching experience as far as, actually teaching in the classroom. I really like coaching and teaching and that kind of thing, but it wasn't something that I had actually gotten a formal education for. So I had a degree in philosophy, and I knew how to think and I knew how to talk with people, but it wasn't something that I had been specifically prepared for, like having a master's in some kind of, English certificate, something like that. But what I learned from the traditional way is that it really didn't work for me, and it didn't seem to work for most of my students. And that's because when you're teaching someone how to do something, instead of telling them the specific rules for how to do it, it's much easier if you can actually show them how the thing works. So imagine if I was going to teach you how to fly an airplane or how to build something. I could tell you a story about that. I could kind of give you the steps or the explanation about how to do that thing, or I could build it with you. So whatever it is we're trying to do, I would actually, show you how to do that thing. And what you're really getting when you're using the traditional, typical methods is you're getting examples of things that would teach you how to teach the rules to somebody else. Now, I know this is kind of a weird way of thinking about it, so just follow me for a second and I will explain a little bit more about what I mean. Now, if you think about how to teach a rule to someone else, I can just easily give a list of rules that says, well, this grammar point should be in this order and you can use it in these situations. Now, it doesn't really help me use that grammar point automatically when I'm speaking, but it does tell me what rules I can do so that I can tell those rules to the next person I'm teaching. So what a lot of typical traditional English education is, and this isn't just English, as I'll explain later in the podcast episode, but basically what people are doing is they are teachers who are learning the rules of the language first and then telling those rules of the language to other people. It could be how to pronounce a particular word. It could be what a specific way you should speak is, like, you have a certain word that you use in a certain context, or you have to speak it in a certain way, or it could be a grammar point. There are many different ways that these rules work, but the problem is that there's kind of a special second layer to learning, and this is what fluency actually comes from. So you can learn the rules for how to do something, but just like I'm training a young police officer how to use a gun. Now I could train them the rules for the gun, how to put the gun together, how to even practice shooting the gun on the shooting range. But once you get them out into the real world and they actually have to use the gun, it's a whole different environment. So if you're, again, trying to teach people with just the rules for something, it's really going to be more difficult for you to get them to kind of transform from a person that understands the rules to a person that can actually use those rules productively in conversations. Now, a lot of the people that are actually teaching English out there, they're already fluent naturally first, and it's the same thing with me. So when I came to Japan and I started learning how to teach, or learning the traditional way to teach, I was already fluent and I had no idea the actual names of the rules that I was using. I just knew how to use them naturally. And that's because I learned English as a native speaker in a way that's different from how we actually teach the language. So not only is the way that the language is taught different, but also the actual language, so the specific words and phrases, are different as well. So when you're learning the traditional way, you're getting kind of two big problems right from the start. You're not learning what you should actually be speaking and listening to if you want to understand native speakers and have really great conversations. And you're also learning the rules for things, so you're not really learning to actually put those together well, just like that young police officer that gets into the real world. And again, the only way to do that is, number one, to learn real conversational English. Again, you want to learn the thing that you want to use in the real world in the real way, so the actual natural way, the same way that native speakers would learn it. And then you also want to learn in a way that doesn't just give you the rules, but actually helps you understand and internalize the rules, to really absorb the rules so that you understand them and can feel how they work. Now again, this feeling or this sense of how grammar works, it's not from studying grammar rules, but it's from understanding how grammar works in a natural way. And that's precisely why I do a lot of video, and my main focus is using video to teach. You can see the motion, how it works, and you understand it intuitively. So that's what I strive for with the lessons I create. Now, getting back to the kind of thing I was speaking about with Power Learning members and the new people that come into the program. So this is kind of a podcast episode not only for people that have been following me for a long time, but also new people, so that you can really understand the difference between what I do and what the traditional methods do. Now, in this email, I wasn't quite angry, but it's one of those things that part of what I do is really almost like a war. It's a struggle between taking all of these people that have learned how to do something one way, even though it doesn't work, they continue to think that that's the way you should be doing it. Now, I want to make this very clear. Basically, you have all of these new students all over the world that are learning English in a particular way. And this is the traditional way. This is what's mostly taught in schools and, what's even in a lot of programs that you can find online. And you will learn a lot of rules, and they'll teach you a lot of individual words and how to pronounce those, but a lot of people, after they've even gone through those kind of methods for many years, they end up not becoming great speakers. And again, for the reasons I've already explained earlier in this episode, that's kind of why it happens. So again, they're not learning the real native conversational English that they should be learning, and then they're learning rules instead of actually how to apply the rules so they can use them actually automatically and confidently in conversations. So recently I actually, I get lots of comments on YouTube, and this one I wanted to make. It was such an important thing to me. I wanted to talk a little bit more about it in addition to the email I sent, but in this podcast episode. And this was on my phonics video series, and a listener or a watcher or a viewer had noted that a particular phonics video would have been better had the International Phonetic Alphabet been used. Now, again, I want to talk very specifically about the International Phonetic Alphabet, and it's something that I don't use, I don't recommend, and it's almost something that I hate. I can't stand the International Phonetic Alphabet. I understand why people would want to use it, but at the same time, it's not required to get you fluent. Now, my problem with the International Phonetic Alphabet and anything else like this, again, it's not just, a problem with speaking symbols or anything like that. It's anything that gets between you and the language that you're learning, or whatever it is you're learning. And I want to talk a little bit more, give you kind of an example, the same example that I gave from the email I sent, and then I'll talk about an additional example that illustrates this a bit more clearly. So imagine the game telephone. Now this is where you have a line of children, you have them all standing in a row or sitting down, and the first child comes up with a sentence and then says that very quietly to the next child in the line. And so this is a process of saying something and listening to it and then saying the same thing to the next person. Now, just like taking a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, if you were to do that with a regular copy machine, over time, the information would get corrupted. So by the time you have many, many children in a long line trying to give some kind of information, at the end, the last child that gets that information will probably get something very different than what happened or what was said by the first child. Now, this happens when people are learning languages, especially when they put more and more steps between what it is they want to learn and then how it is they're learning it. So as an example, I can teach someone a grammar rule by showing it to them, and that's really the fastest way to learn it. You can review how you practice grammar, but really the reason that you learn it quickly like that is because it's intuitive and you can understand exactly what's happening. And when your brain understands that, that's when you get excited to learn. It's not really having to do anything in particular. You could say like, well, I'm a person that likes to listen in order to learn, or I like to watch, or I like to move around. There are lots of different ways to learn, but really all of these things have is a particular way of getting you to the same place, and that is an intuitive understanding of what the grammar point is or what the word means or something like that. And so I talk a lot about that, and I teach a lot about that because it's such an important thing for learners. You want to intuitively understand a rule or a vocabulary word or something, or you want to at least learn the explanation of that thing in English. So again, this is how non-native speakers are learning. They're learning kind of the translation of a word, or they learn the definition in their own language, and that's what stops them from using these things confidently and automatically when they speak, because they have to think about what the word is, they have to translate it in their heads, they have to think about whether it's the right word for the situation or the context, and then they start to speak. And then they worry after that maybe what they're saying is incorrect. So there's lots that's happening in a non-native speaker's mind, and this is, it happens to, people like me. So I'm learning Japanese, and it's the same kind of situation. But because of how I learn Japanese, I don't really do so much thinking in my head when I speak. I just kind of naturally speak. I may not know every word I want to use, but I'm really speaking much more fluently because I didn't teach myself how to speak the language the traditional way. I stopped doing that when it stopped working for me, and that's exactly why I teach the way I teach now. So when I was beginning to teach English and also beginning to learn Japanese at that same time, I did the typical thing that most people do. And so I learned firsthand. This word firsthand means I learned it myself. So firsthand. So I learned firsthand that the situation or that way of learning didn't work for me. Now, it could work for some people. Any system might work well for some people as long as you push hard enough and you do it well. But I'd rather use a chair lift to get up a mountain than to climb the mountain myself, if really the goal is just get to the top of the mountain so that you can ski down. So I'm always thinking about that. What's the fastest way to learn, why we should have certain things in lessons or not. And this idea of having to use the International Phonetic Alphabet or any kind of grammar rules, it's really what slows you down and gets in the way of learning how to speak. Now, I don't really know any native speakers that know most of the names for grammar points or even any symbol for the International Phonetic Alphabet. And that should be a very strong clue that it's not something that's required if you want to learn. Now, maybe it's something that if you want to learn how to master many different languages at the same time, then having a syllable set that would teach you just how to listen to the sounds or how to understand them, that might be helpful. But if you really just want to learn how to speak, why not focus on the individual sounds and learn how to read them and write them and understand them in that language? So that's what I do, and that's what I teach. Now, maybe you disagree with that, and that's just fine. Some people like using the International Phonetic Alphabet, but I don't. And again, the reason why is because it's getting in the way of what you want to do. It's putting an additional step between you and the language you actually want to speak. Now, to give you a kind of a different way of looking at this, I want to talk about it from a business perspective. And this is kind of a typical thing that most people do when they're learning a business or they want to actually learn how to make a business for the first time. And this is, again, just like when I was learning to be a teacher, I was learning to build a business at the same time. And when I was learning to build a business and thinking about how to do that, when you really want to start, you kind of get serious about something. You really want to build a business. You think about, okay, I have to do things in a certain way, and you have a certain idea. That there are certain rules or other things that you have to do in a certain way in order to do that, just like learning a language. So I want to talk a little bit more about my personal experience in having done that and why I do things much differently now but achieve a lot more success. So I want to begin talking about my kind of later business experience, not my like very, very young things like lemonade stands and that kind of thing, but the more when I wanted to build my publishing company and I started working on that. Now, the kind of thing that I did when I began was I was thinking about doing business in the way that most people do that really have no business experience. So a lot of the people that they think about an idea and they think the idea is the most important thing, and they have this great idea and then they want to figure out how to produce that thing. And the reason we kind of get this way of thinking is because, in my opinion, there is a kind of cultural myth about how businesses are formed. So we have an idea that, okay, we should be having a specific idea first, and then we work really hard on it in our garage or our basement or our bathroom or wherever, and then we release that item to the world, and if it does well, if it's a great product, it sells millions, and then you become a fabulously wealthy person and everything is great. Now, it usually doesn't work like that, and that's why it becomes such a frustrating thing. It's kind of the same way that people think about learning a language. So they think, okay, like a language is just a collection of rules. So really, if I just learn the rules, then I will become a great speaker. And that's the same thing as if I just learn the rules of business and I read a few business books, then I will become a successful business person. But when people actually start doing that, they realize that it doesn't work that way. And that's exactly what happened to me. So when I was a young adult and thinking about starting my publishing company, I read lots of business books about how to do things, and it talked a lot about, really coming up with a great plan and finding things, and like you really work hard on the product. And again, I always had in the back of my mind this idea that, okay, I have to think really hard and come up with an idea myself, and then try to make it as perfect as possible, and then begin selling it to people. Now, again, I really want to hammer this home. This idea of hammering something home means to really make the point clear. So I want to hammer home the idea that there is a kind of two things. One is learning the rules of business, the specific things you have to do, like building a business plan and really thinking about producing a quality product. And then also thinking about the myth that people have in the back of their head, which is that they need to produce something really great, and then that's how people make money. So first you come up with a great idea, and if you don't come up with a great idea, then you can never become a person that's a successful business person. And really a lot of this comes from what we see on movies and TV. We watch like the story of Mark Zuckerberg or somebody else that had a great idea and just think, wow, like that person was smart and they had a great idea and they worked really hard at building it, and then it just took off and magically became successful. But we never really hear the stories about all of the millions of other people that have really thriving, successful businesses and didn't build them that way. And again, like what I'm really trying to do is show the connection between this way of thinking for business and this way of thinking for learning a language. And I want you to go direct to the source. I want you to get to that. Just like you're learning a language, you want to learn something in an intuitive way so that you understand it, and you understand it directly as opposed to going through steps. So what I did when I was first building my publishing business, again, I was reading lots of books and then trying to figure out all of these specific things I needed to do, and I was doing what I thought was what you're supposed to do because that's what everybody does and that's what you see on TV. But as you'll learn here, and as you should be figuring out, just because a whole bunch of other people around the world are doing something, that doesn't mean it's what you should be doing, especially if a lot of them aren't finding success doing that thing. Now, maybe a few people will do a really great job with a particular system, and that could be for anything, but unless a system is really great for a majority of people, or it really works well no matter who's using it, then that's really what's going to determine whether a system is actually good or not. So when I began learning again, I was, using the business books and thinking about the way to do it. I spent all of this time figuring out how to do something without any thought at all about the market. And as I learned and I, started learning more about business and marketing and advertising and other things like that, I started to also look at the different way that I should be rethinking the way I learn and the way I teach English. So what began to change is when I really thought about what's essential here. I really want to when I teach and when I learn, I want to give myself a lot of motivation, and the best way to do that is to have a lot of quick successes. And it could be something very small. It doesn't need to be a really large thing. It could be really just something as simple as like finding your first customer. And that's really like the basis of business. If you don't have a paying customer, you don't have a business, period. And instead of thinking about a product and other things that you have to do, you really have to think about what's essential and what are the real steps that you need to take in order to achieve something. So let's contrast the differences between the typical way that people turn an idea into a business and the kind of not so typical way, but the way that's actually much more successful and much more likely to give you a guarantee of success. So the typical way is, again, to think about an idea, to really think hard about that, and then once you come up with a good idea, to really focus on it. You're working on it independently, and then you release that idea into the world, and hopefully it does well. Now, the better way to do this, and this is what I've learned over my years of doing business, is to not begin with a product at all. What you want to begin with is a market, and a market is just a group of people looking to solve a problem. And so when you stop thinking about an idea that you need to come up with, what you're really thinking about is, what does the market need? What is the actual problem that needs to be solved? And once you do that, all of the pressure is gone to come up with an idea and to think that, well, it's my idea, and if I don't have an idea, then I don't know what I'll do. There are an infinite number of problems in this world, and with each new business, there are new problems that are created for other businesses because they have to compete or they have to figure out how to change their business methods or models, anything like that. So what I did when I was kind of learning a different way to do business, I was also thinking about a different way to teach. And that whole idea of really getting to the heart of what's essential and what's required in order to achieve success. So in the business example, what you really want to do is go to a market first and really listen to them and talk to people and figure out what is the problem that I could solve for this group of people. And because you're doing that, what you're really doing is finding your first customer or your first group of customers. Because again, that's what a business is. It's just an entity that creates solutions for people that want to achieve something or they want to relieve a pain or something like that. And if you can do that, that's how you create a business. And the product and all of that gets created after the fact, around those ideas. Just like as an English teacher, I was thinking, well, why don't I get to really what's required here? Do you really need to know the rules of the language in order to speak it? Or should you just understand the rules of the language and how to speak them automatically? Now, if that's the case, then we should see millions and millions of people around the world that, number one, understand how to use English, and number two, don't know the rules and they can't explain how to use the rules. And that's exactly what we find. We find native speakers all over the planet, from Britain and United States and Canada and England and other countries, where people are understanding the language intuitively and then learning how to speak it automatically without actually knowing all the rules. And so why would you want to use something like the International Phonetic Alphabet or complicated examples and rules when you can go straight to the language? It should be really obvious and really easy that way. So that's exactly why I teach, and it does get kind of frustrating because if you look at the world right now, it's kind of like a factory of people that are learning in two ways. You have a much huger, a much larger, an enormous factory of people that are learning English the traditional way. So in countries all over the world, people are sitting in classrooms right now, right at this moment, and they're learning the traditional kind of bad, ineffective way of learning the language. Now, some of them will work really hard and they will figure out some way to get fluent by using that, but most of them will not. And most of them will become people that are listening to me, and they're going to be wondering, why is he not teaching the traditional way? So even though the system didn't really work for them, they are going to continue to ask, well, why don't you teach it this way? So if you are a kind of person that likes, additional explanations, or you like to use the International Phonetic Alphabet or other things like that, I am probably not going to be very helpful for you. But if you really want to just get to the language, if you really want to speak and actually communicate in the same way that I'm doing right now, really express your ideas in a way that you could when you're speaking your own native language. Now, of course, even right now, I still have to think about what I want to say, but it's not because I don't understand the rules. I'm thinking about what I want to say because I want to express myself clearly and make sure what I'm saying is easy to understand. But at the same time, I'm not thinking about what grammar point to use or how I should use it, or whether this phonetic symbol from the International Phonetic Alphabet is corresponding to something that I'm saying right now. So just like the way I figured out, okay, we should be doing business in a different way, why shouldn't we be doing, English learning and lots of other studies in a different way? So that's exactly why I do what I do and why the International Phonetic Alphabet is not a part of what I do. When I teach phonics, I get you straight to the letters you should be using and what sounds they make. And maybe there's a very, very quick explanation in English about why something is like that, but it's the same way that I would teach a native speaker how to do something. And that's exactly why I teach the way I do. So if you like the way I teach, then continue to watch what I do and listen to lessons and things like that. But if you don't, that's perfectly fine. You can have, there are tons of English lessons available for people that really just want to do it the traditional way, even if it might not help them succeed. So I focus completely on eliminating as many steps, as many things in between, or what I like to call filters. Again, a filter is something that it's changing the way you see something, just like a translation when you're watching a movie. So if you're watching a movie with subtitles, then that set of subtitles is a filter between what you're actually hearing, what's on the movie screen, and what you get in your ear. So if you want to become a great speaker, you have to eliminate filters. You have to get to the language and get direct to the language. So if you're having problems with getting direct access to something like, let's say you're watching movies and you're wondering, okay, how can I watch a movie or TV show when I can't really understand much of it? Well, the answer to that would be to take your English, or take what it is you're using, down to a more basic level. If you're not understanding the TV show or the movie that you're watching, take it down to a level of understanding that maybe a child would be using, and work back up from there. It's much better to take a step back and really master the basics than to keep trying to push in the same direction you're going when it's not getting you anywhere. You'll get back to movies and things quickly if you take a step back and start reviewing the things that are easier for you. So begin with books and TV shows that you understand at least 80 to 90% of, so that way your brain understands the new information nice and easily, and then you can work your way back up to that. And finally, I'd like to leave you with 3 keys that will help you plot your own course to success. The first one is that you decide how you learn. So it's your decision. You are the one that gets fluent, and even if a teacher is telling you a certain way that you have to learn, you don't have to learn that way. You can decide to follow your own path. You can decide that even if so many students or millions of learners are learning things one way, maybe that's not the way it has to be for me. And the second thing, the one connected with that, is that you decide how you learn, and you have to test. So you have to try different things. Maybe my method works for you, maybe it doesn't, depending on how you like to learn. Like I said, what I do is I create things that make it really intuitive and easy and obvious for people to understand. But what I don't do is try to give lots of explanations about how the grammar physically works, because it just isn't very helpful. So that's why you won't see many diagrams of grammar in what I teach, especially in Master English Conversation. And the final thing is that if you need help, if you'd like me to help you personally and really help you find the clearest path not only to success, but also to learning all of the individual things about the language, like the real words and phrases that native speakers actually use, or the way that we pronounce things and the way we actually blend things and speak smoothly. If you'd like help doing all of those things and you don't really know how to learn yourself so that you can become a really great speaker, I invite you to try Master English Conversation. And you can learn more about that by clicking on the link below this video that will tell you all about how you can learn intuitively and naturally with as few steps as possible by connecting directly with the language. And you do all of this so that when you finally speak, you don't have to think about the language, you don't have long pauses when you speak, and you can really express yourself in English the way you do when you're speaking your own language. Well, I hope it's been a really great episode for you. Remember that, you decide how you want to learn. You don't have to do things in a certain way unless you really want to do them and unless they're successful for you. And if the traditional methods are working for you, that's great. They just didn't work for me, and they don't seem to be working for many other people around the world. So that's why I do what I do. I really want to make it easy and obvious and understandable for people so that you don't have to put extra steps and explanations and translations and rules between what you're doing and what it is you want to speak. Well, have an excellent day, and I will see you at EnglishAnyone.com, and I wish you the very best. Remember to keep things intuitive, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.